Am I in? Is this me? Have you tagged me in? So I am going to do my best to do this. So bear with me, as also having an iPad to run off and also to check my notes. And also I've had 3 coffees as well. So I'm a bit, if I'm speaking too fast, like just someone give me a signal and let me know. So yeah, thanks for that introduction. So as you all heard, I'm Jamie and I'm founder of Down to Earth. But first and foremost, I'm a nature enthusiast. I believe nature not only needs to be part of what we it needs to be the focal point of everything that we do, but it also needs to be the focal point of all our own individual relationships. We all need to have a relationship with nature. So when Hannah came up to me and asked me to do this topic, well, you actually gave me a selection.
I did.
And then I was like, I'm doing that. And so I kind of had an idea and I was going to put some notes together and make it all a good presentation. But because we're talking about wilderness and I like going on rambles and I'm a rambling brain anyway, just bear that in mind. We are going to be going off into the wilderness. How you like that?
Oh,
so, yeah, Down to Earth, all about connecting people with nature, making nature as accessible as possible. And that's not just physically, it's more psychologically. That's what I found. Where we are now, we can see a lot of nature. It's very physically accessible. The demographic of Derby, the majority actually haven't been even to the Peak District, which is like our biggest wilderness spot on our doorstep. And it's actually not that wild, actually, either, but it's our closest spot to go out into Mother Nature and get as close to nature as possible. And the majority of people don't get that access. So that's what Down to Earth is kind of all about, is making it as accessible as possible. I'm going to stop talking about Down to Earth because I didn't want it all to be about that. But we will have a bit of a moment at the end. We might do a bit of Q&A in after. But I wanted to talk about this theme because this theme, it's super, super important to my life, like super important. My relationship with nature is like the thing that's got me through the last 10 years of my life. Obviously my kids have come into that and my wife as well, but the last 10 years I've worked shift work. So I'm subcontracted to run Down to Earth at the minute. So I run Down to Earth and I got subcontracted by Rolls-Royce. That's where I work. October the 1st, 2021. And I've got a year. So I'm nearly ran out, so I'm a bit impatient, but yeah. I'm all about going outside. Been a shop floor factory fitter for 10 years, working class, kind of struggled socially, isolated, not really having enough to do and having enough going off, especially working shifts. Like my shifts were like, I was working 4 days on, 4 days off, 12-hour shifts. So you can think how heavy that is on your mental health and physical well-being. And as an adolescent, I was just stuck. I was like, what am I doing with my life? And making money and getting a mortgage and having a house and, going on that journey. But like, is this really it? And essentially my relationship with nature just started with me going for walks with my dogs at Alishry Park. And we were like, you know what, let's go further. So me and my mate, who had kind of the same kind of lifestyle as me, we'd go to the Peak District in the middle of the week and we'd just start exploring. And we literally would just go for the day in the morning, find a route, have no idea where we're going, which is, all right in the Peak District, but no idea where we're going. I would never turn our back. I don't know how many people go for walks, but you never go back, do you? You never want to go back. You always want to carry on and go in the unexplored. And we'd do these routes. And obviously there was a pub at the end, as always. There's always a pub at the end. And that relationship with nature and doing that in my days off, like it carried me through my next block of shifts. Like I was like, there is something more powerful here than just going out and getting fresh air. There's more to this relationship with nature than just that. And because of, my background and what I was doing, and the impact of being like someone enthusiastic about nature, it was a really interesting journey to kind of delve into. Told you I was going to ramble. Told you. And yeah, it just sent me on a wild journey of this connection with nature stuff, and it's what's got me here today, like what's got me where I am now and being sponsored by Rolls-Royce, which is like the maddest thing ever. So there's your not so brief introduction. But yeah, so we'll talk probably about down to earth. So doing that stuff, we do take people out for walks in the Peak District. Find it's a real cool thing. Might do a Creative Mornings one, maybe sometime. That'd be good. But from my kind of experiences, we just started taking people for walks in the Peak District and started to create a bit of a community. And it was just sick. It was just super cool. Like just people from all walks of life. We had people come from Portsmouth to come for the walks that we were doing in the Peak District and taking people for rambles, and obviously always a pub at the end. But sharing like stories, like having that social, kind of like new social centered around nature and community is incredible, because everything that I was feeling and I thought I was by myself, everybody else felt the same. Like everybody else felt the same, and it was like, it was empowering. So we did a load of rambles, and obviously going into the wilderness stuff, I'll probably talk about my own kind of personal rambles. I've done some stupid stuff. Has anyone been Snowdon? Has anyone done Crib Goch? Have you ever gone back down Crib Goch? No, I did it with my arm in a sling. What an idiot. What a stupid thing to do. But like just that fact of doing stuff like that, and then actually a couple of guys, they were coming up Crib Goch and they said, "You're an idiot, what are you doing?" But I got to the bottom and I like kissed the ground. Super dangerous Crib Goch, like it's probably the most dangerous bit of going up Snowdon. I won't do it again. Didn't tell my missus when I got home either what I did.
That would have been more dangerous.
Yeah, that would have been more dangerous. But it kind of, doing them experiences and, you know, pushing yourself out in nature, it's just super empowering, even though that was such a stupid thing, but kind of like led me into this theme of wilderness and thinking about, you know, what is the wilderness? Like, what is it to me? And what is it in general? I got the, I don't know how many people have actually ever done this, but got the definition of the word. Does that happen much? Does it?
Yeah.
So, I've lost it in my notes already. So the wilderness meaning, an uncultivated, uninhabited and inhospitable region, or a neglected or abandoned area. The garden had become a wilderness of weeds and bushes. As I said, I'm a keen nature enthusiast, super into gardening. So with that kind of wilderness point in mind, I like got into the garden. And wilderness to me, it wasn't that factual terminology. It was a feeling. Because it's quite ironic now in my life. I'm telling people to connect with nature, and I'm probably the person who has the least amount of time to connect with nature. I've got 2 kids under 3. Don't ask me why. And actually really struggle to get that time now. So when I do get it, and like having this chance to do this, I took it up and made sure my head was in the right space at the right time, and absorbing as much of that environment as I could. And I think, you know, taking in wilderness, that theme, being in the garden for me. So I'm an organic grower, and I'm very enthusiastic about, you know, biodiversity and making my garden a wilderness and making it a food forest and seeing everything kind of play out. It's amazing. And I'm gonna put the kids to bed eventually, because they don't like going to bed, do they? Flipping out, honestly. That's my biggest struggle at the minute. Put them to bed, and my moments in the garden are so important to connect with nature and that wilderness element. Because I end up going out, you know, got my Crocs on, Every gardener's got Crocs, I think. You become grown up when you get Crocs. I think that's when you become grown up. You don't care anymore. They're too comfortable. So I got my Crocs on. I'm going out in the garden. You know, I've got my to-do list, and it's massive. And I've got to get around it. And I get into that to-do list. I'm starting to do things. And like the noise starts to fade away. And I'm hearing everything happening in the garden. And I take my Crocs off. I'm on barefoot walking around the garden now. And I'm like Mowgli. I would have tried to say Tarzan, but probably more like Mowgli. So I'm walking around the garden and I'm just pottering. To-do list has gone out of my head and I'm just doing what I want to do and what feels right. And what I find, you know, just doing that in the garden, it kind of, you tune out of life, out of the rat race, out of the wheel. You know, you're spinning so fast, you're trying to do so many things and keep up everything. And being out in nature, no matter what that wilderness looks like, being out in that, it takes you away and it puts you right in the most important piece of your life there and then and what you need and what is essential for your being. And what I started to realise was I was becoming part of the environment. Like I was becoming part of the garden. You know, and I always say, obviously you lot might be thinking, what is this guy going on about? Like, it's crazy. But I always say, like, my garden is like my friend. It's like a sanctuary for me. It's a friend that I learn stuff from, constantly learning lessons, constantly teaching me about patience and you know, this relationship with nature. So yeah, that no matter where, there is always wilderness to explore and get ourselves into and you know, that it's always going to be about that relationship with nature for me, always, and I think it's so important. So yeah. And just to go back to that Peak District, you know, going out and exploring, and that fact that we never want to go back on ourselves and we want to always go into the unexplored, I think that's like a massive human trait. You know, we all want to do it. We all want to do things, and especially as a group of creatives, you want to push them boundaries as far as possible. And we want to get lost, don't we? Like, we always want to just get lost. Like, we want to get away from it all. You know, like these things, getting away from it all, getting lost and going into the unexplored. I was like, but what are we getting away from? Like, why are we getting lost? Like, surely that should be what life's about, is doing them things, not trying to get away from it all. It should be all. It should be it all. Just something to think about. Told you, I was going to ramble. So yeah, doing this thing, it kind of gave me that permission to myself to go out and really contemplate that relationship with nature. And actually, although Miles Richardson talks a lot about this, who's the leader in nature connectedness research here at the university, he always says it actually isn't about the time spent out, it's actually the quality of that time spent out. So it's 5 minutes, could be anything. And I really felt that, you know, just taking this kind of assignment on, and I really felt, no matter how long I had, that relationship with nature. So yeah, I've spoke about that. Wilderness is a feeling, more than the factual terminology. Sorry. So I'm probably going to go into the deep end now. I don't know if that was already deep, or we're going to go deeper. We're going deeper. So following this like wilderness theme and kind of getting ourselves outdoors and going to the unexplored and you know, kind of started realizing what all this rambling was, like this walking and getting out into nature was. And actually what it is, it's actually a worship. It's like a worship. I'm going a bit hippie here, but it is a worship to earth. You know, it's like a worship to earth, but actually it's a worship to ourselves, to our highest level of ourselves. And I completely mean that to the most. You know, like I say, mental health issues, like I've had mental health issues. I've been like depressed, I've had anxiety, I've gone through their motions and working and being isolated. And going out into nature empowered me. And that was self-worship. And I think that is such an important thing. And to be honest, it is what we need most now. Because we need remedies from getting away from it all. We need them remedies from, why do we need to get lost? And going out into the garden and going out to the Peak District, and that self-worship is a remedy for how society kind of operates now. And it's important. It's so important. And that's kind of what Down to Earth's all about, is this relationship with nature. It's worship for not just nature, but ourselves. I am going to go a bit deeper into that as well, so bear with me. And obviously it is a bit cheesy. The wilderness, it's a place where we lose ourselves to find ourselves. And that is the getting lost. That's why we want to get lost. We want to find ourselves. And it's the cheesy cliche that, I've been traveling, I went traveling for a year, and all my mates, they were like, did you find yourself? Like it was a running joke. And actually, I was like that, I did. I was like, it's so hard to say, but I did, because I didn't have no social cues, no social, I didn't have that straw man identity that carried through, who Jamie was in Derby. And, when you go out into the wilderness, that comes out. That kind of true essence of yourself comes out. So yeah, it's so important. And yeah, it's true. Like the amount of times I have taken myself out to get lost, to work through things in my head, that getting lost, that is where you find that time to work through them things in your subconscious. Did watch an interesting documentary actually about mushrooms. Told you I was going to ramble. Told you. It was about mushrooms and actually the impact of psychedelic mushrooms in supporting people's depression. And it was super interesting, actually. There is a connection here. How the dosage they gave them got them lost in their heads to the point of the subconscious, and it brought memories up of their most, where the depression came from. And it all came from like a childhood trauma. But by getting lost in their own heads, in that wilderness, they found a way to become their own therapist. So if you've ever got one about psychedelics that I could talk about, that'd be great. What time are we on? We good?
We're good.
We all good? Are we all good anyway? Is this making any sense, or are we enjoying it? That's okay then. You sure? So yeah, so much. There's so much to go into. And actually, Hannah, one thing that I kind of, and what we were talking about earlier about university, who hands up for who went to university as a student? Like how many people went to university, and how was that as a passage of rites? Like for me, I think like university, it is a passage of rites, but it's not about the education. It's actually about getting drunk. It's about getting drunk and debauchery, and how many stupid things you can do and get done. And like, I think across the Western world, that is something that, it's highly known for. But if you look into indigenous cultures, especially like the Native Americans and the Aboriginals, their adolescence passage of rites is walkabout. The Native Americans, indigenous communities, the adolescents have to go for 3 days out into the wilderness, right? No food, no water, no shelter. And they have to reflect on themselves. So they go out into the wilderness, and I can't remember the book, I've got a book about it, but the one thing that came up the most was how much they got in their own heads. And I think, the wilderness that is out there is a reflection of our own minds. And it's so important as creatives to go out and go into the unexplored, because what you find, especially for me, because I have a lot of crazy ideas, is that going out and getting out into nature and pushing them boundaries, it helps you push the boundaries of your creativity. It really puts that in perspective. Could talk about them crazy ideas at some point as well. So yeah, it pushes the boundaries, and in nature, it kind of is, for me, very spiritual. It's like it's the highest spiritual practice we have. And yeah, it's, just trying to, I can't see my screen, sorry. It's a very spiritual practice. For me, obviously you probably already got that, but for me, you know, it connects us very quickly to our truest version of what we are and who we are. And going back to that crib gok experience, like for me, going out into nature puts you in your place, you know, and it makes you feel human, no matter if that means you're scared because you've gone the wrong way with your arm in a sling, or, you know, you're elated because you've achieved something, you've got to the top of a mountain or whatever, or just being out, you know, just being out in nature. So yeah, I'm gonna probably wrap it all up, but I think like the most important thing to kind of say is like this theme of wilderness and our like relationship with nature. I wouldn't be here waffling at you all about it, and you know, I've been subcontracted from Rolls Royce to run down to earth. I've got no clue what I'm doing, by the way. You know, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know what it's obvious I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just rolling with the punches, and I'm very passionate and enthusiastic about this because I've had revelations, you know, like, oh God, that sounds very intense. But that's what nature's given me, is a revelation. And I think to make it accessible for all, kind of my goal through Down to Earth is to give people them mini revelations in nature, that they learn their own relationship and they can access that own relationship with nature and their own worship of themselves and that own empowerment, and be inspired by it creatively. And yeah, I'm a shop floor factory fitter who builds airplane engines for a living, and I'm talking about nature as a spirituality. So I think that says it all. You know, I think that says it all, like where I'm at and what we're doing. And you know, we've got massive ambitions for Derby and we've got massive ambitions for the Peak District and beyond. But you know, what I've learned from this theme, and especially me as Jamie, who is pushing our relationship with nature and trying to get it to be the forefront and focal point of every single thing that we do, is that, you know, it's got to happen. It's got to happen if we're gonna survive. And we need to rewild people. We're talking about rewilding spaces. We've got Rewild Alistry, largest urban rewilding project, which is banging, you know, super cool. It's all good having these spaces, but if we're like super sanitized and sterile from nature, and we're not walking barefoot, even if it is for 20 seconds, or whatever it is, if we're not embracing nature, there is no point doing all this rewilding. We have to rewild ourselves. We have to give ourselves that time to get into the wild, the wilderness, unexplored, you know, push ourselves and empower ourselves through that relationship. We have to. So yeah, that's it. That's all I've got to say. That's my waffle done. So thanks for listening. I hope it was good.